Thank you all for being with us. Mr. Wells, on February 13th, 2023, the EPA announced its disapproval of the Arkansas State Implementation Plan for the 2015 rule regarding ozone national ambient air quality standards. Instead, Arkansas is now required to follow the federal implementation plan, which will put roughly 50 Arkansas businesses at risk of closure. I understand, again, after listening to your testimony, you're in the same situation. The impacted businesses include power plants, natural gas pipelines, cement producers, steel factories, glass and paper, chemical manufacturers, paper mills, etc. The EPA has refused to let Arkansas revise the plan. The Clean Air Act was intended to prescribe a cooperative federalism model of regulation between the states and the federal government. Do you feel EPA treated your state fairly in this way, the way it handled and ultimately rejected your SIP plan?
No, sir, I don't. I believe they moved the goalpost on us after we submitted our SIP. We believe it was approvable at the time we submitted it, and for them to reject the SIP based on information that was not available to us at the time we developed it and not give us an opportunity to revise it and to have say-so in terms of the emission reductions that would be placed on Mississippi facilities, I think was a circumvention of the Clean Air Act.
So, Director Peters, you don't know if yours is going to be approved or not. Do you feel like it's appropriate, if it's not approved, that you're put in the same situation as Arkansas, Mississippi, and I'm sure other states, in the sense of not being able to revise your plan? Instead, the federal government, sitting here in Washington, implements a plan for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Boozman, of course, we're awaiting EPA's decision, and we'll evaluate very closely what it is that they decide and how it impacts our state. Until we see that, it's really difficult for me to speak to it. Of course, I'm concerned for the potential impacts to businesses and sources in our state, but we recognize our shared responsibility for clean air.
No, I understand. I think we all want to get to the same point. As the chairman indicated, he's going to ask you a question about where the middle ground is, but certainly the idea that you, being on the ground, your state, you guys want clean air as much as anybody. The idea that the EPA is great until you disagree with them, okay? They talk about, federal cooperation and all of this stuff, but again, once you disagree, then it tends to be their way. So the point I'm trying to make is, as we go forward for this to work, for it to be fair nationwide, then again, the states need to have the ability to be a part of that. And that hasn't been the case in Mississippi and Arkansas, and I assume that both of you all, as administrators, would agree, that's not appropriate. Mr. Noe, in your testimony, you said that the Good Neighbor Plan is just one piece of a massive regulatory agenda that concerns you. Can you provide further details of regulations that are going to impact pulp and paper mills?
Yes, thank you for the question, Senator.
And tell us about the communities that the pulp and paper mills are in.
Yes, yes, sir.
Rural America, what
Yes.
that would do to these
Yes,
small
and first I
towns.
just want to thank you for giving voice to our industry and the over 23,000 workers we have in Arkansas and 84 facilities. There are a whole series of regulations that are coming at us, and they're coming very soon. One example is EPA's PM-NACS rule. We're not questioning EPA's whether they ought to regulate here, but the problem is they're moving so fast, which is also why they made the mistakes they made in this rule, that they're not going to have an implementation plan ready for when it kicks in. We're in kind of a catch-22 under the Clean Air Act, because we're in these remote rural communities where the air's clean, we're in attainment. Ironically, the requirements kick in immediately. It's the dirtier areas that are non-attainment that get extensions, that can trade with other sources, do offsets and all of that. What does this mean? It means there's going to be a permit gridlock problem. we're not going to be able to get the permits we need to modernize our mills, which, by the way, makes them both cleaner and competitive. There's a bunch of other rules I noted in my statement, and there are a whole lot more, Senator. I've never seen a regulatory agenda this massive in my career, and I've worked on these issues for many years.
Dr. Hill, you mentioned, the impact this has on your patients. What are, just out of curiosity, what are the top 4 or 5, when you see patients, what are the top 4 or 5? You mentioned this is a causal factor of them having problems. What are the top 4 or 5 causal factors of the patients you see besides this?
So, when we're looking at asthma, frequently allergies and allergens play a role, and air pollution has a cumulative effect on allergens. So both ozone and particulate matter tends to make allergens more harmful to the lungs. Mm-hmm. So there's an additive effect between
allergens, what
control.
Else?
Cigarette smoking and other forms of smoking in this country is still a significant cause of lung disease. Infectious disease, obviously, triggering exacerbations in this population. Those are the real big factors, but air pollution plays a significant role. And in my own practice in our electronic health record, we actually, for our asthma and COPD patients, have specific checkboxes because patients will tell us they can't go outside on hot, humid days. They have trouble breathing. They can't exercise.
If you drive up the cost of everything dramatically, where does poverty play? What role does it play in that?
It's a challenge. I don't think this is the right venue to talk about the cost of healthcare in general.
Well, I'm talking about the cost of electricity and everything else.
It plays a role. Being unable to breathe, as the Lung Association says, is the one thing that really matters. The EPA's estimates say that this will increase the cost of electricity by about 1%. That's probably not our biggest concern in rising electricity costs. So I think any increase in cost to my patients, particularly those who are economically challenged, is a concern, but the downstream health effects of this make it a worthwhile investment. Okay. I have this conversation with my patients all the time in terms of cost of care. Taking their preventative medicines is expensive. Getting sick and going to the hospital is much more expensive. So sometimes you have to spend the money up front to save the money down the road.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.